The reinforced walls of Sector 7 hummed with electromagnetic energy, designed to contain the most dangerous prisoners of war. Captain Marcus Vale walked the sterile corridor with measured steps, his military boots echoing against polished metal floors. The datapad in his hands detailed his newest assignment, a Vex-High warrior captured during the final battle of Kepler Station. "She's in Cell 9 Alpha," Sergeant Rodriguez briefed him, his voice tense. "2 counselors quit last week. She doesn't attack, but the way she stares, it gets under your skin." Marcus nodded, studying the file. Kythera of the 3rd Talon, a commander-class warrior standing nearly 8 feet tall with obsidian skin, marked by intricate silver scarification that told the story of her battles. The photographs showed a creature that seemed carved from nightmares. Angular features, 4 arms ending in clawed hands, and eyes like molten gold that seemed to burn through the camera lens. The cell door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Marcus stepped inside, immediately feeling the weight of predatory attention settle on him like a physical force. Kythera sat cross-legged in the center of the room, her massive frame making the spacious cell seem cramped. She wore standard issue, gray clothing that barely contained her muscular form, the fabric straining across shoulders broader than any human's. "Another one," she spoke, her voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floor. Her accent carried the harsh consonants of her native tongue. "How long will you last, little human?" Marcus settled into the chair positioned safely outside. Her reach, though he suspected those long arms could still grab him if she truly wanted. He set down his datapad and studied her face. Beneath the fearsome exterior, he caught something unexpected, weariness that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "Captain Marcus Vale," he said calmly. "I'm here to talk." "Talk." She laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "About what? How sorry I should feel for the humans I killed? How grateful I should be for your mercy?" Her 4 hands clenched into fists. "I know what this is. Psychological breaking. Make the weapon compliant for whatever experiments come next. Is that what you think you are? A weapon?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. Her golden eyes narrowed, searching his face for deception. "I was bred for war, trained from birth to kill. What else could I be?" Marcus leaned forward slightly, ignoring the way her pupils dilated at his movement. "You could be someone who's tired of fighting." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the containment field. Kythera's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for him to read. Finally, she spoke again, her voice softer, but no less dangerous. "You're different from the others. They fear me or hate me, you." She tilted her head, studying him with unsettling intensity. "You look at me like I'm a puzzle to solve." "Maybe I am," Marcus admitted. 3 years of war, and this is the first time I've had a chance to really talk to one of your people, to understand what drove this conflict beyond military briefings and propaganda. Understanding. She spat the word. "Your people understand only dominance and submission. You defeated us, so now you seek to tame us." Marcus's jaw tightened, and for the first time, Kythera saw a flash of something darker in his blue eyes. "I've seen enough of dominance to last several lifetimes, lost enough friends to it. That's not what this is about." Something in his tone made her pause. She noticed the way his left shoulder sat slightly higher than his right, the thin scar that disappeared beneath his collar, the careful way he held his hands. This human carried his own wounds. "Then what is it about?" she asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then said, "Maybe finding out if there's something left after the war ends. For both of us." The confession hung in the air between them. Kythera felt an unfamiliar sensation, curiosity about this scarred human who spoke of understanding rather than conquest. She'd expected interrogation, torture, or clinical detachment. Instead, she found something that disturbed her more than violence ever could, genuine interest in her as more than just a defeated enemy. "Time's up," came Rodriguez's voice through the intercom. Marcus stood, gathering his datapad. "I'll be back tomorrow." "Why?" The question escaped before she could stop it. He paused at the doorway, looking back at her over his shoulder. Because I think you have more to say than you've had the chance to say it. As the door sealed shut behind him, Kythera remained motionless, replaying their conversation. For the first time since her capture, the silence of her cell felt different. Not like a tomb, but like the quiet before something important was about to begin. Outside in the corridor, Marcus leaned against the wall, steadying himself. Rodriguez approached with raised eyebrows. How'd it go? She say anything useful? Marcus looked back at the sealed door, remembering those golden eyes and the weight of centuries of conditioning he'd glimpsed behind them. It's going to take time. But as he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that Kythera had seen something. In him too, something that made her curiosity as dangerous as her claws. 3 weeks passed before Kythera spoke more than single-word responses. Marcus arrived each day with the same quiet patience, sometimes reading reports aloud, other times simply sitting in comfortable silence. He brought books, classics of human literature that she initially scorned, but eventually listened to with grudging interest. Why do your stories always focus on individual choice? She asked one afternoon, interrupting his reading of an ancient poem. Among my people, the collective decides everything. Personal desires are irrelevant. Marcus closed the book, marking his place with a finger. Maybe that's why you're here instead of leading armies. Her golden eyes flashed dangerously. Careful, human. Marcus, he corrected gently. And I meant that as observation, not insult. You made a choice to surrender when your ship was damaged instead of fighting to the death. Your file says that's unusual for Vex High commanders. Kythera's expression grew distant. My crew, they were barely adults. Conscripts from the outer colonies who'd never seen real battle. Her hands clenched. I watched them die one by one, their fear filling the bridge like smoke. When your ship surrounded us, I thought. She stopped, jaw tightening. You thought, what? That maybe some of them deserved to see their homes again, even as prisoners. The admission hung between them, heavy with implications. Marcus leaned forward, studying her face with new understanding. That decision probably saved 50 lives, and condemned me as a traitor to everything I was taught to value, or revealed something your people tried to condition out of you. Marcus's voice was soft. Compassion isn't weakness, Kythera. It's what separates warriors from monsters. She laughed bitterly. Pretty words from someone who's never had to choose between duty and conscience with a gun to your head. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then rolled up his left sleeve. Kythera's eyes widened at the sight of his forearm, a twisted mass of scar tissue that looked like metal had been embedded in flesh and forcibly removed. Shrapnel bomb, he said simply. 3 years ago, during the siege of New Geneva, my unit was ordered to hold a building that we knew contained civilian refugees. Enemy fire was coming from the upper floors, and command wanted us to bring the whole structure down. Kythera leaned forward despite herself, drawn by the pain in his voice. I refused the order, tried to evacuate the civilians first. He traced one of the deeper scars with his finger. The building came down anyway with me inside it. 23 people died, including 2 of my soldiers who stayed to help with the rescue. And you blame yourself, she said quietly. Every day. His blue eyes met hers. But I'd make the same choice again. Some things matter more than following orders. Something shifted in Kythera's expression, a crack in the armor she'd worn for so long. The human military didn't execute. You for disobedience? They tried. Court-martial, dishonor, the works. But enough people spoke for me that they offered rehabilitation instead. Retraining as a counselor for prisoners of war. He smiled grimly. Apparently, they thought my experience with moral compromise might be useful. Kythera studied his scarred arm, then reached out slowly. Marcus tensed but didn't pull away as her fingers traced the damaged skin with surprising gentleness. Her touch was warm, almost burning compared to human contact. Your people allow such mercy? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Some do. Others would prefer simpler solutions. His breath caught, as her thumb brushed over a particularly sensitive scar. But the ones who matter understand that healing takes time. She pulled her hand back abruptly, as if suddenly aware of the intimacy of the gesture. I don't know how to heal, Marcus. My people, we're taught that scars are trophies, that pain is strength. But sitting here talking with you, she shook her head. I feel like I'm betraying everything I ever was. Maybe you're becoming something new instead. The words hit her like a physical blow. Kythera rose abruptly, pacing to the far wall of her cell. Something new, she repeated, her voice hollow. Do you know what that means for someone like me? I have no family, no clan, no purpose without war. If I'm not a weapon, then what am I? Marcus stood too, approaching the edge of the containment field. You could be whatever you choose to be. Choice. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Such a foreign concept. It gets easier with practice. Their eyes met across the barrier between them, and for a moment, the space felt charged with something neither quite understood. Kythera pressed her palm against the energy field, and Marcus mirrored the gesture on his side. The barrier hummed between their hands, a reminder of the gulf that separated their worlds. Will you come back? Tomorrow? She asked. And for the first time, her voice held something other than defiance or resignation. Every day, Marcus promised. As he left, Kythera remained by the barrier, staring at the place where his hand had almost touched hers. The feeling, growing in her chest, was terrifying and wonderful. Hope, she realized. She was learning to hope again, and it frightened her more than any battle ever had. 2 months of daily sessions had transformed something fundamental between them. Marcus arrived to find Kythera waiting by the barrier, a rare agitation in her usually controlled posture. Her silver markings seemed to shimmer in the artificial light, and he noticed she'd woven her long black hair into an intricate pattern he hadn't seen before. You're different today, he observed, settling into his chair. Among my people, she began without preamble, there are courtship rituals, patterns in hair, in scarification, in the way we move. Her golden eyes fixed on his face with uncomfortable intensity. I find myself performing them without conscious thought when I know you're coming. Marcus felt heat creep up his neck. Kythera, do you know what this means? Her voice was barely controlled. A warrior of the third Talon, unconsciously displaying mating behaviors for a human male. She laughed, but it sounded broken. I am becoming something monstrous. That's not, look at me. She spread her arms wide, and Marcus's breath caught. Even in standard prison clothing, she was magnificent, tall and powerful, her obsidian skin gleaming, every line of her body speaking of deadly grace. Really look at me, Marcus. Not as a prisoner or a patient or a curiosity. Look at me as I am. Marcus stood slowly, approaching the barrier. His eyes traveled over her face, noting the elegant bone structure beneath the alien features, the way her silver markings followed the graceful curve of her neck, the vulnerability hiding behind her fierce expression. I see you, he said quietly, then answer me truthfully. Her voice dropped to a whisper, and he heard the question that had been building between them for weeks. Am I ugly to you? The words hung in the air like a blade. Marcus saw past the fierce exterior to the woman beneath, someone who'd been told her entire life that she was nothing but a weapon, who was now discovering feelings she'd never been allowed to have, who was terrified that her very nature made her unworthy of tenderness. No, he said simply. You're beautiful. Kythera's composure cracked. A sound escaped her throat, half sob, half gasp of disbelief. She pressed both hands against the barrier, and Marcus matched the gesture, their palms separated by mere inches of energy. You're lying, she whispered, but her voice held desperate hope. I've never lied to you. Marcus's voice was rough with emotion. You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, Kythera, not despite what you are, but because of it. Strong and graceful and fighting so hard to become something more than what you were made to be. Tears he hadn't known her species could cry tracked silver paths down her dark cheeks. I don't know how to be beautiful. I only know how to be deadly." "Then let me teach you." The barrier flickered, a brief power fluctuation that lasted only seconds. In that instant, there was nothing between them, and Marcus's hand touched her palm. The contact sent electricity racing through both of them. Her skin was fever-warm, textured like silk over steel. The moment ended almost immediately as the field regenerated, but the sensation lingered. Marcus. His name on her lips was a prayer and a plea. "I know," he said. "I feel it too. This is madness. Interspecies relationships are forbidden even if I weren't a prisoner, even if you weren't my counselor. Rules written by people who never felt what we're feeling." Kithara leaned her forehead against the barrier, and Marcus mirrored the gesture. They were so close he could see the flecks of amber in her golden eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "What happens now?" she whispered. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "But I know I can't pretend this isn't happening anymore. If we're discovered, we'll face it together." She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they held a new determination. "Then teach me," she said. "Teach me how to be more than a weapon. Teach me how to be yours." The words were a complete surrender, not of defeat, but of trust. Marcus felt the weight of that gift, understanding that she was offering him something she'd never given anyone. Her heart unguarded and fragile despite the fierce exterior that contained it. "Starting tomorrow," he promised, "we begin your real education." As he left that day, both of them knew they'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The question wasn't whether they were falling in love. They'd already fallen. The question was whether love could survive in a world determined to keep them apart. Behind the barrier, Kithara touched her lips, imagining what his kiss might feel like. For the first time in her life, she looked forward to tomorrow, not because it might bring battle, but because it would bring him. The maintenance tunnel hadn't been used in months, which made it perfect for their purposes. Marcus disabled the security camera with practiced efficiency, a skill from his military days that he'd never thought he'd use for romance. Kithara emerged from the shadows like a living statue come to life, her movements silent despite her size. "This is insane," she whispered, but she was smiling, the first genuine smile he'd ever seen from her. "Completely," Marcus agreed, pulling her deeper into the abandoned section. "Your cell's surveillance system is down for exactly 47 minutes. They'd been planning this for weeks. Ever since that first touch through the failing barrier had ignited something neither could ignore. Small rebellions at first, lingering glances, accidental brushes of fingers during sessions, conversations that strayed far from therapeutic boundaries. But the stolen moments weren't enough anymore. In the dim maintenance bay, surrounded by humming machinery and forgotten equipment, they faced each other without barriers for the first time. Marcus reached up to cup her face, marveling at how perfectly his hands fit against her angular features. "You're trembling," he observed. "So are you." Her voice was soft, vulnerable in a way he'd never heard before. "I've killed hundreds of your people, Marcus. Destroyed ships, ended lives without hesitation, but this, being gentle, it terrifies me." "Good," he said, thumb brushing over her cheekbone. "It means you're not just a weapon anymore." She leaned into his touch like a cat seeking warmth. "Show me," she whispered. "Show me how to be soft." Their first kiss was tentative, exploration rather than passion. Her lips were warm and surprisingly soft, and she tasted of something exotic that made his head spin. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Again," she demanded, and this time there was nothing tentative about it. Marcus pulled her closer, marveling at the contrast between her deadly strength and the careful way she held him, as if afraid her touch might break him. Her hands tangled in his hair, and she made a sound deep in her throat that sent fire racing through his veins. "I want to see you," she breathed against his lips. "All of you." They undressed with urgency born of stolen time and forbidden desire. In the dim light, Marcus traced the silver patterns on her skin, ritual scarification that told the story of her victories and losses. Under his touch, she shivered and arched, discovering that pleasure could be as overwhelming as pain. Beautiful, he murmured against her throat and felt her pulse jump beneath his lips. So beautiful. I don't understand, she gasped as his hands mapped her body with reverent care. How can you want someone like me? Because you're not someone like you, Marcus said, meeting her eyes. You're Kythera. You're strong and fierce and brave enough to choose love over everything you were taught to value. How could I not want you? When they came together, it was with desperate tenderness, two damaged souls finding wholeness in each other. She was careful with her strength, and he was patient with her inexperience at being vulnerable. They moved together like dancers learning a new rhythm, all gasps and whispered endearments and the sweet friction of skin against skin. I love you, Marcus said when they lay entwined afterward, her head on his chest. I know it's impossible, but I love you. Among my people, she said quietly, there's no word for love as you understand it, only duty, honor, conquest. She lifted her head to look at him. But if love is this feeling, like I would burn the galaxy to keep you safe, then yes, I love you too. They held each other until the chronometer warned them time was running. Out. Getting dressed was almost painful, each piece of clothing a reminder of the roles they had to resume. What happens when the peace negotiations end? Kythera asked as they prepared to return to their separate worlds. Marcus's expression darkened. The tribunal will decide your fate, most likely execution or permanent imprisonment. And if I escape, I'd be court-martialed for helping you, probably executed myself. She cupped his face in her hands. Then we have to make every moment count. Their goodbye kiss tasted of desperation, and promises neither was sure they could keep. As Kythera slipped back toward her cell, and Marcus returned to his quarters, both carried the weight of loving someone the universe had decreed they couldn't have. In the weeks that followed, their stolen meetings became more frequent and more dangerous. They made love in forgotten supply closets, abandoned observation decks, and maintenance corridors throughout the facility. Every encounter was shadowed by the knowledge that discovery would mean death for both of them. Run away with me, Marcus whispered one night as they lay tangled together in a disused storage bay. I have contacts, people who could help us disappear. And live as fugitives forever? Kythera traced patterns on his chest with her fingertips. What kind of life is that? A life together. Isn't that worth something? She was quiet for so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with resignation. The tribunal convenes next week. They'll want to make an example of me, the first Vex High Commander to surrender. They'll broadcast my execution across both our worlds as a symbol of human victory. Not if I have anything to say about it. Marcus, no. Promise me you won't do anything foolish. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw the same desperate love that burned in her own heart. They both knew that promises were easy to make and impossible to keep when love was on the line. The final night before the tribunal, they didn't speak of the future. Instead, they loved each other with the fierce intensity of those who know their time is ending, memorizing every touch, every kiss, every whispered endearment against the long darkness ahead. The tribunal chamber buzzed with tension as representatives from both species gathered to witness justice. Kythera stood in the defendant's dock, chains binding her wrists despite the ceremonial nature of the proceedings. Her execution had been predetermined. This was merely theater for the peace process. Marcus sat in the observers section, his service pistol heavy against his hip. Around him, military officials and diplomats whispered about the precedent being set, the message being sent. None of them saw the weapon he'd smuggled in or noticed his hand resting casually near it. Kythera of the Third Talon, the presiding judge intoned, you stand accused of war crimes against humanity. How do you answer? Guilty, she said simply, her golden eyes finding Marcus across the room. I killed your soldiers, destroyed your ships, and fought with everything I had to protect my people. I regret the necessity, but not the actions. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the broken plea for mercy they'd expected. Do you have anything to say before sentence is passed? Kithara straightened to her full height, magnificent even in chains. Yes, I have learned something during my imprisonment that changes everything I thought I knew about your species. The judge gestured for her to continue. You have among you a man named Marcus Vale, Captain Marcus Vale, formerly of the 3rd Infantry, now serving as a counselor in your rehabilitation program. She found his eyes across the room, and her voice grew stronger. This man showed me mercy when I deserved none, kindness when I expected cruelty. He looked at me, a creature bred for killing, and saw someone worth saving. Marcus felt every eye in the room turn toward him. His hand tightened on his weapon. Through him, I learned that humans are capable of compassion that transcends species, forgiveness that heals old wounds, and love. Her voice broke slightly. Love that transforms even the most broken among us. Touching, the judge said dryly. But it doesn't change. I'm not finished. Kithra's voice carried the authority of command. If you execute me today, you prove that peace between our peoples is impossible. You show that mercy is weakness, that understanding is folly. But if you choose differently, we don't negotiate with war criminals, someone shouted from the gallery. Then you'll have war with my people forever, Kithara replied calmly. Because I'm not the only one who's tired of fighting. There are others among the Vexai who question the old ways, who wonder if there might be something better than endless conflict. Kill me, and you kill that hope. Marcus stood slowly, his decision made. She's right. Security moved toward him, immediately, but he raised his hands peacefully. Captain Marcus Vale requesting permission to address the tribunal. You're out of order, Captain, the judge warned. With respect, Your Honor, this entire proceeding is out of order. Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. We're about to execute someone for the crime of learning to love, someone who chose surrender over slaughter, who protected her crew at the cost of her honor, who represents the best hope for lasting peace between our species. Captain Vale, stand down immediately, came the sharp command from General Harrison, his superior officer. No, sir, I won't. Marcus's hand moved to his weapon, not to draw it, but to remove it entirely. He set the pistol on the floor and stepped away. I'm guilty of the same crime as the defendant. I fell in love with her. She taught me that the enemy has a face, a heart, a soul worth protecting. If that makes me a traitor, then I'll stand trial beside her. The chamber erupted in chaos. Security rushed forward, but Marcus raised his voice above the noise. Look at her, he shouted. Really look at her. She could have fought to the death, taken dozens of us with her. Instead, she chose mercy. She chose hope. And we're going to kill her for it? Kithra's chains suddenly sparked and fell away. A gift from an ally she hadn't known she had. She could have escaped, could have fought her way out of the chamber. Instead, she walked calmly to Marcus's side and took his hand. If you want to execute someone for loving across species lines, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chaos, then execute us both. But know that our love represents everything the peace treaty claims to stand for. Understanding, forgiveness, and the belief that our species can build something better together. The chamber fell silent. Cameras rolled, broadcasting the moment. Across both worlds, a human and a Vexai, standing hand in hand, choosing love over everything else. General Harrison stepped forward, his face grim. For a moment Marcus thought it was over, that they'd die for their defiance. Then the old soldier surprised everyone. Stand down, he ordered security. All of you, stand down. He approached the couple, studying them with eyes that had seen too many wars. Captain Vale, you're either the bravest man I've ever met or the most foolish. Both, sir, Marcus replied without hesitation. Harrison turned to Kithara. And you. You could have killed half this room and escaped. Why didn't you? Because that would prove I'm still just a weapon, she said simply. And I'm not. Not anymore. The general was quiet for a long moment, then addressed the tribunal. Motion to commute the defendant's sentence to time served with supervised release into Captain Vale's custody. General, that's highly irregular. So is love, Your Honor. So is peace. So is hope. Harrison's voice carried the weight of command. We can kill them and prove that understanding is impossible, or we can let them live and prove that it isn't. I know which future I want to fight for. The vote was closer than it should have been, but love won by the narrowest of margins. As the chamber cleared, Marcus and Cathara found themselves alone for the first time as free beings. So, she said, still holding his hand, what do we do now? Now? Marcus smiled, lifting their joined hands to press a kiss to her knuckles. Now we build something new, together. Outside the tribunal building, protesters chanted for and against their union. But inside, a human and a Vexhi began planning a future that neither of their species had thought possible. A future where love truly could conquer all, one heart at a time. Their wedding, broadcast across both worlds 6 months later, became a symbol of the peace that followed. And in the years to come, when their children played in gardens where once battlefields had stretched, the galaxy would remember that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply choosing to love.